hands, unmute yourself, and jump in. To introduce myself, a little bit about me, I am Ruth Diaz. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I've been doing community building and teaching on leadership and conflict resiliency for about the last 4 or 5 years in virtual reality. And I love talking about uncomfortable things to build better spaces where we can include more perspectives. And this is one of the topics that people don't really think about or like to talk about as often. So we're going to dive right in. And let me get my screen up so I can switch pages. All right. So like you may have heard before, I'm a DEI practitioner. I do resiliency trainings. I'm also an organizational and leadership consultant, environmental designer. So that's what I love to do as a pastime, but I've also done that professionally, and a community consultant. So before I tell you my definition of toxic positivity, what is your definition of toxic positivity? Just so you know, you're all on mute. So you have to unmute yourself if you're going to try to get one. Carl. Never heard of it. Wow. So glad you're here. That's courageous. Steph, what about you? Yeah, that's a good one. So I want to break that down because it can kind of be a scary question. What is toxic positivity? Like when I hear that question, I feel negative all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, what have I been doing? So just starting with toxic. Toxic to me is not a bad word. It's not a negative word. It just means too and not enough of the other things. So much of one thing, like a pond, and there's this whole ecosystem of all these different organisms in that pond. And then maybe an invasive species gets released in there and it eats all the different organisms. And then it's not a balanced ecosystem. It doesn't have a good immune system for all the storms and fluxes that are going to come. So toxic just means too much of one thing and not enough of the others. And when we talk about positivity, it can mean that we have this anxiety or this fear about saying what's really here right now. And so we're always trying to get into the healthy, happy, thriving emotions and not acknowledging the death and the destruction and the ick that exists in all of our lives at every given moment. And while it can be good to take a vacation of sorts or an escape from what is hard in our lives, sometimes when we combine only the positives together, it becomes more and more disconnected and the presence goes away. And we're going to talk about the consequences and maybe some ideas of what to do when we are in that toxic positivity state, how to recognize it. So here's my visual for toxic positive. It's a pathway of only smiling faces. This is what ChatGPT came up with. And I was like, that's pretty cool. It's very creepy, but I like it. So overgeneralization of happy, optimistic state on all situations, leading to denial, minimization, and invalidation of human emotional experiences. That being said, I want you to understand I have been toxically positive many, many times. It happens in all of us. I grew up in the generation of the phrase smile and you will cause healthy, you will cause miles and miles of smiles. Like I saw that everywhere, and the sticky, smiley faces that were everywhere. Like positivity was huge in my generation. So that came from the early 20th century, this self-help, positive thinking era. And then later in the 20th century, we had this self-actualization that kind of invaded corporate culture. And this idea of that thriving was the thing everybody should focus on. I'm not saying any of those things are wrong. I'm just saying that when we only have one gear, we lose all the emotion and feeling to actually appreciate that forward momentum. And I believe that's a huge part of our conflict avoidant culture is toxic positivity. And then we have social media and how we've had this clickbait culture where all we do is try to show the healthiest, most positive, shiny versions of our reality TV lives where we are just, sparkling and ready to be viral. But recently, in maybe the last decade, this mental health awareness has started to come clear of, is it positive if I can't be present with the negative? Like, to feel our positivity, we have to take time to be with the negativity or the uncomfortable places. And where are we making spaces and rituals to do that? Back in the day, it